the American Museum of Natural History. And they're important and big, and it's a lovely museum in New York, but they've also got AmNat, right? The journal, one of the top journals in organismal biology. And of course, they have they may not even own anymore. It certainly went off the rails a long time ago, but the lay magazine Natural History, I think that was also AMNH publication for a while. Well, they have, apparently it's 150 years. You can show my screen here now. Teen Sci Cafe. That's SCI for those who are not watching. So it's Teen Science Cafe. They've got sort of these events that they are running. And it's brought to my attention that an upcoming event is species jumping viruses. This is a week from now. So you did not know what was coming, but you're about to learn.
Okay.
Teen Sci Cafe at the American Museum of Natural History is offering a little walkthrough on species jumping viruses next Saturday. What do Zika, West Nile, Ebola, HIV, and SARS-CoV-2 all have in common? They are all zoonotic viruses that affect other species and have evolved to infect humans, who can in turn pass viruses to other species. Are they now? Join Mark Valatuto, VMD, Senior Field Veterinarian for, wait for it, the EcoHealth Alliance, to learn about how zoonotic viruses jump from one species to another and how scientists are using this information to prepare for and prevent future pandemics.
I can see the lesson now. Okay. Typically, a virus will go from its host species and it will move to an intermediate species like a ferret badger or a laboratory of virology, and then it will jump into humans from there. And,
Well, but usually there's like an intermediate vector, I would say, between ferret badger and humans that involves a popsicle.
The frozen ferret badger steaks. I do remember that trial balloon well. That was a
good one.
That was a good one. I enjoyed that moment.
Yeah. So EcoHealth Alliance, for those who have forgotten, is God. Well, I mean,
we don't know what it is.
They've had their hand in everything, but they were the pass-through organization, right? They were the pass-through organization where NIH was giving them the grants, and they were shunting the money to the Wuhan Lab that was doing the gain-of-function research that is almost certainly where SARS-CoV-2 came from, meaning like not zoonotic, no, not unless you're taking a really big definition of zoonotic there, and clearly that's not what is meant to be implied here. But also then the president or the founder or whatever was put on lead on the trip to China to discover whether or not SARS-CoV-2 could possibly have come from the lab, or much more likely from the frozen ferret badger steaks. It's basically all of those very, very bad habits of the very, very bad Chinese people, but it was us who were talking about lab leak who were the racist ones.
Right, the ones who thought that this was American work from North Carolina that had been offshored to China because of via
the pass-through organization that's EcoHealth Alliance.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, white guys. For example, Peter Daszak,
right.
The head of that organization. It's unbelievable that they would try to pawn this off on kids. Yeah. Right.
14-year-olds and up. They do recommend for Teen Sci Cafe that you be 14 or older.
So have you heard Jeffrey Sachs talk about this? Jeffrey Sachs has switched sides in the origins debate, and he's been on a tear because actually he got taken advantage of as the head of the panel looking into the question of origins, who put Peter Daszak on it. And anyway, he's fascinating to listen to.
Yeah, I haven't.
Because basically what he discovered was that his entire panel had conflicts of interest and were lying. Right. And, this is Jeffrey Sachs. So anyway, it's...
My God.
Yeah.
So the American Museum of Natural History is doing this to us. You can put my screen back up. What do Zika, West Nile, Ebola, HIV, and SARS-CoV-2 all have in common? Well, I hope they don't all have the fact that they're not zoonotic in common.
Ooh, I didn't even think of that interpretation.
But you click through, and it's just easier for me to do this with screenshots. Past events. Teen Sci Cafe, your friendly neighborhood coyote? Okay. Teen Sci Cafe, health equity, racial inequality, and COVID-19. Wait, what? Okay. So let's click through and see what Teen Sci Cafe
This is what the kids call a risky click.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Health equity, racial inequality, and COVID-19. What do we have to learn from AMNH? This was an event that already happened in November. The COVID-19 pandemic disproportionately affected communities of color across the U.S. But why? How has a legacy of systemic racial inequality in the United States contributed to higher rates of infection and death and lower rates of vaccination in communities of color? Join First Deputy Commissioner and Chief Equity Officer of the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, Torianne Easterling, MD, to find out how the history of medical treatment and mistreatment in the BIPOC community set the stage for inequities during the pandemic and what we can do to reach equity in the future. Couple things.
Oh, yeah. Let's hear 'em.
Couple things. People of color, BIPOC, people of color, whatever, right, have darker skin.
I was going to mention this.
It's synonymous. That's a tautology, right? Darker skin is an adaptation to having had ancestors who are more recently hearkening from closer to the equator, and it is preventative against skin cancer in places where there is so much sun that the need to make vitamin D at the most optimal rate, the most efficient rate, is not there because you're already getting so much. And so what darker skin does, while also being a preventative against skin cancer, is it reduces the skin's ability to synthesize vitamin D. Which means especially as you, being a dark-skinned person, move farther and farther from the equator and put on more and more clothes because you're farther and farther from the equator, you are much more likely to be vitamin D deficient even than white-skinned folk who are living farther from the equator and also spending too much time inside and too much time covered up. White skin is more likely to burn, more likely to result in sunburn and therefore skin cancers, but much more efficient at synthesizing vitamin D. We know, and this has nothing to do with racism, that dark skin cannot synthesize vitamin D as effectively, and therefore dark-skinned people who live farther from the equator are more likely to be vitamin D deficient. And we also know that vitamin D deficiency is a factor in bad COVID outcomes.
Both increases the likelihood of contracting COVID and the badness of the interaction with the disease.
Exactly. It's also true that the history of racism in the United States, which is true and real, has created some really terrible events in African American history, like Tuskegee, right? Yep. And so African Americans are appropriately skeptical when the government comes to them and says, "Trust us, it's safe, do what we say." In this case, the fact that Black Americans, African Americans, are less vaccinated than their white and Asian counterparts probably was the right move. But American Museum of Natural History is looking to redress that inequity.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course they are. While hiding, we don't know for sure that they didn't talk about vitamin D, but given the way they set that thing up, basically the idea is the cause of this is racism,
right,
rather than the cause of this is a physiological distinction that has a perfectly well understood explanation that has nothing to do with anybody engaging in racism. It has to do with the angle of the sun coming through the atmosphere and the relative risk of cancer versus vitamin D deficiency. And anyway,
trade-offs are racist.
That's a weird perspective.
I mean, I guess the third point, and again, I didn't even know about this thing until after it happened, and we obviously weren't there. We don't know what was said. So I read the blurb that was all that was available publicly. But it's also true that the blurb would seem to be implying that part of the problem was that some demographics didn't have access to the vaccines.
Right.
Everyone had access.
Everybody had access.
It was beyond access. It was forced down our throats at every opportunity, all the time, advertised everywhere. Come here, go there, anywhere you want. It's available. It's free. It's easy. You must, it was beyond accessible. Yeah. So the idea that it was racial inequity that kept Black people from getting vaccinated,
Yeah.
No.
No, it's obviously a preposterous explanation, right? You had to be somewhat clever not to get vaccinated while you weren't paying attention.
Yeah.